Hello, welcome to another Seeds of Flourishing episode. So, a lot of these Seeds of Flourishing episodes, although there's particular days when I'll do a particular type of episode, the subject matter can be quite random. I wouldn't say I plan more than about a week ahead in terms of what I'm going to talk about. The whole point of them was that it was supposed to be fairly spontaneous in both its delivery and in terms of the subject areas that I cover, although some things not so much, because often in the case with the consciousness studies episodes, it's something that I'm working on all the time or thinking about all the time. But there's other episodes where literally I'll have a thought come in my head and I think, I should do something about that. I should talk a little bit about that, featuring an episode. And today's episode on Jimi Hendrix is a good example of that. And how this popped into my head is during the week, so Monday to Friday, I always do I think they used to call it daily dozen, although it's not really a daily dozen. But, I do a number of simple exercises before breakfast. So, some planks, crunches, curls, whatever you want to call them, and some push-ups. And during that time, to sort of distract me a little bit from from what can sometimes get a bit of I wouldn't say a chore, but I think if anybody that does regular exercise every day will know that some days you just don't really want to do it. But after you've done it, you feel a hell of a lot better. So often what I'll do is I'll stick on a YouTube video that's just popped up in my feed. And I subscribe to a channel, which is the JHS Pedals channel, and I'll come on to that particular video in a moment, because it's pertinent to this discussion. But I subscribed to that channel, and this morning there was a video which I think I'd watched before, an older video that popped up on my homepage about the pedals that Jimi Hendrix used. And I thought it'd be interesting to do a gateway video just generally for Jimi Hendrix, and just talk a little bit around the period from 67 through to 69. And riff around that a little bit. So, I brought up the Jimi Hendrix article on Wikipedia just to help me a little bit, and a few other articles as well. I'm not going to read through a ton of this, and I'll include, as I always do, links to this. There's a playlist I think I'll include as well, where this morning I collected together the 3 studio albums and the live album, and I think they're the extended version, so they're not in their original form. And I'll include a Spotify link to that if you're interested in having a listen through. So let's just look at the discography for Jimi Hendrix and sort of go from there. So you can see in terms of studio albums, we've got Are You Experienced, Axis Bold as Love, Electric Ladyland. So first 2 came out in 67, and then we had the third one come out in 68. And then there was this Band of Gypsys album released in 1970, which was a different lineup, if you like. It wasn't the Jimi Hendrix Experience. It was different musicians involved. And of course, if you know a little bit about Hendrix, you'll know that sadly by 1970, so September of 1970, he died, basically. Obviously far too young. He was 27 when he died. But even in that short space of time, he had a massive impact on, for me, two big areas. Music, but also the use of electronic devices in music, particularly on guitar. And so that was what I was really interested in when I saw that in my feed this morning, because on the JHS channel for that episode, they went through all the major effects pedals that Hendrix used during his recording period, during his lifetime, and infilled it with a little bit of information about the bands he was in before he formed the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and a few other key players, if you like, in his ascendancy, and also related to his use of effects pedals. And it's a fascinating episode to watch, and like I said, I'll include a link there. And anybody that's familiar with Hendrix will know that effects-wise, he's associated with fuzz pedals, the Octavia pedal in various guises, and it's nice how the episode goes in and sort of walks through that. Wah-wah and Univibe. So back to the albums, you can see in terms of during his lifetime, this is what was put out in terms of studio albums, live albums. When you get to compilation albums, you had smash hits and this, which apparently was not released in the US but was in the UK. There's a couple of compilation albums, and then all the singles that were released. And also there's an interesting list, because this does get raised in that JHS video on the JHS channel, the albums where he was a sideman, because often this is sometimes not always apparent to people. And then of course singles he was on. And then probably, I suspect somewhere there's a list of all the cash-in stuff, if you like. But it's nice that for the purposes of this article, they've kept together all the stuff prior to his death, and they've kept the posthumous discography separate. I won't go down that particular rabbit hole. If I haven't mentioned already, sometimes I forget when I mention these things, I've created a little playlist, like I said, with these three albums and the Band of Gypsys, the extended versions. So as I've said, there's also the equipment side of things. Guitars that he was associated with, amplifiers and effects, and then subsequently his influences. And that's a whole interesting area in and of itself, particularly if, like me, you are really fascinated by guitars and guitar technology, both as an instrument and as a cultural item, basically. So in this episode, I'm going to take a quick look at the UK charts, just to try and orient it from that point, and then we'll look at a couple of, I'll suggest a couple of videos to watch if it's a thing you want to explore further. What I will say is, when I do come to maybe spin this out into a new series next year, I want to look at 3 years in music history through a UK lens and see what changed in those 3 years. So I might pick a period from, say, 77 to 79 and look at the movement in the various genres that were occurring through the lens of the UK charts, because that's what I'm most familiar with. I'll probably pick years that I well, I will pick years that I've where I lived through them to a degree where I can actually remember that time, because it just makes it more interesting and more informative and more authentic when I can relate to that. So what I'm getting at is, when I come to do those series, I will be definitely knee deep in the charts and looking through across, I suppose, more horizontally than vertically, if that makes sense. Whereas in this particular episode, which is a Seeds of Flourishing episode, I'm looking essentially vertically down through an artist. So you can see first singles hit the UK charts in 1967. Got Hey Joe, Purple Haze, The Wind Cries Mary, Burning of the Midnight Lamp, All Along the Watchtower, Crosstown Traffic, Voodoo Child. So so you can see their movement into the 70s. Gypsy Eyes, Remember. So this is the posthumous stuff. Onwards. This probably coincides with a fairly major compilation album, I suspect. The 90s ones. If we look at the albums, you can sort of get an interesting placement here. So we've got Are You Experienced, Axis Bold as Love, and then a Smash Hits album is released. Then we get Jimi Hendrix and Curtis Knight album, and then Electric Ladyland, and then Band of Gypsys. So again, the cut-off here for the in terms of the where the posthumous releases starts is here, and you can see there's quite a number here. This is really interesting. So they released a soundtrack for the 73 documentary, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But yeah, you can just see the sheer number of posthumous releases here. But what I wanted to do is firstly just quickly, I did separate it out there. Let's just look at, say, the first single and when that hit the charts, and just see, as I've done a lot in my album musings episode, get a feel for what else was around. So there we have Hey Joe, number 6, highest position. Monkeys, Cat Stevens. The Move, super interesting band. They're put in with that, what would you say, proto-prog? Is that right? Hang on, no, I'm getting confused here. No, sorry, I'll roll that back. The Move would have, they're more of a psychedelic band, I think. Its name is on the tip of my tongue, and he was in the first incarnation of Electric Light Orchestra, but his name escapes me. Roy Wood, that's it, Roy Wood. Yeah. So I know why I'm getting confused. I'm thinking of The Nice. That's who I'm thinking of. So The Nice are a prog band. So The Move, they did, what was it, Fire Brigade, I think was the track they did. Yeah. Anyway, back to the other bands. We got The Who, Seekers, Cream. So you sort of get the idea. There's a lot of, blues rock bands in the charts. But we've got some other stuff as well, stuff that sort of leans on R&B as well. But a number of other artists I can see cropping up here. as well. Oh, Friday on My Mind by the Easy Beats. There's a connection, isn't there, between the Easy Beats and AC/DC? Wasn't one of the eldest young, one of the, oh yeah. So again, I'm trying to do this from memory, but yeah, I'm sure one of the managers of AC/DC, who's a relation of the Youngs. The Young was in the Easy Beats. I think that's right. And then if we move to Voodoo Chart, so got to number 1. When would that be? Oh, that's really close, isn't it? War by Edwin Starr, Jimmy Ruffin. I don't recognise. Oh, Neil Diamond, Deep Purple, Black Night, of course. Yeah, so 69 was when the first 2 Led Zepp albums came out, and Deep Purple were also kicking around. It's just before, so 1970 was when Sabbath released their first album, and actually Paranoid was out as well. Yep, there's Paranoid. So it's an interesting period in rock music because you have these sort of heavy metal stirrings going on in that period. So we are getting up to, end of the 70s here. So slightly more than, it's more of a 4-year period than a 3-year period. And then if I quickly look at the middle, so what do we do? 67, sort of 68 when we have 68 to 69. Let's look at the tail end of 68 actually while we're at it. So this is sort of middle period. Oh, Eloise, that was covered by The Damned years later. Isley Brothers, Scaffold Lily the Pink. Wow, I do remember that. Oh, Joe Cocker with a little help from my friends. Wow. Funny. So yeah, always makes me smile. You can probably hear my smile when I look back. Moving on to the albums. So we'll just start off with Are You Experienced? This will be probably a little bit more interesting for me. Oh, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Sound of Music, Monkeys, Dubliners, Tom Jones. So I'm looking for the heavier stuff. Oh look, the Dr. Zhivago original soundtrack. Tremolos, Trini Lopez. There's a guitar attributed to Trini Lopez. Between the Buttons, Rolling Stones, Otis Redding, Beach Boys. Axis Bold of Love. We might as well do all of the studio albums. Oops. Oh. So this, don't forget, of course, this was the same year. The 2 first albums came out the same year. So no surprise to see Sgt. Pepper still kicking around. Sound of Music. Rolling Stones had their Satanic Majesty's Request out. Tom Jones had a Smash Hits package. Traffic, which is Reading. Oh, 2 Dubliners albums. Who had Sell Out, Magical Mystery Tour by the Beatles. And I don't know if you saw it there, the Fiddler on the Roof soundtrack. Okay. Let's have a look and have a look at Electric Ladyland now. So here again, I'm just doing what I normally do, which is look at the highest entry. Oh wow, number 1 was the Beatles' The White Album. So this would be December 78. Sounds of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel. So yeah, two Simon and Garfunkel albums in the charts. Oh, Folsom Prison by Johnny Cash. Oh, there you go. 3 Simon and Garfunkel. So yeah. Such the Lost Chord. Yeah, more proggy stuff there. Holly's had a greatest hits out. Oh, and the soundtrack to The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. So let's have a peek at the band of Gypsys. Went straight in at number 6. So as I mentioned, different lineup for this particular band. Oh, Simon and Garfunkel again. The Nice. So I mentioned them earlier by mistake, thinking it was The Move. Let It Be by the Beatles. The Paul McCartney album was out. Live, Cream by Cream, Band of Gypsys. There it is. Easy Rider, Deep Purple in Rock. So, yep. Here, charts definitely look getting a lot heavier. Led Zeppelin 2, The Who Live at Leeds, Black Sabbath first album. Oh, King Crimson. Steppenwolf Live. Jungle Book, I actually remember seeing that at the cinema as a child. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting, isn't it? Looking at this, definitely more of a rock fan's album chart at this point, and that makes a lot of sense when you're looking at the time frame. So in terms of the equipment, this is definitely well worth a look. The guitar pedals of Jimi Hendrix, and I'll include a link to that. And then I've included a link to this theatrical trailer. I don't know how easy it is to track this particular documentary on YouTube. I suspect if it's been uploaded, it's been taken down. But I have this on DVD, and it's well worth a watch. It came out in 73, so it was actually quite soon. It wasn't a massive time period after. That's 3 years after his death. And they say here it's been remastered and remixed to provide exceptional sound and picture quality. Yeah, the original is a little bit grainy because of the different sources used for the interviews. And there's some great interviews on here. I particularly love the Little Richard interview. In fact, I like anything with Little Richard being interviewed. He's such a colourful character and highly quotable. And particularly the case in this one. I don't know if you can see me hovering over him. And he's in this wonderful. It's funny, when I saw it, it was one of those weird things where I'm watching it with one of my brothers. We used to love watching this. We had it. I think we recorded it off the TV, or no, actually we would have rented it from our local video store. We rented it on several occasions, and for some reason we had that collective misremembering where we thought he was wearing like medical scrubs for some reason. He's in like this hospital smock. We're thinking, what's Little Richard doing in hospital? And then we realised, no, it's actually his stage attire, and he's sitting by a piano there. So yeah, that's funny. When I looked at it years later, I realised, oh no, he's not in a medical smock. He's not wearing scrubs. That's actually his stage gear. I'm thinking, well, it was a bit sparkly. So I think I'll call it a halt there. This has been a very interesting episode. So thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in the next episode.